All right. Chris, thanks as always. Chris, last February, President Trump was asked by Julie Pace of the Associated Press, who often is on your panel, whether he knew of any contacts between his campaign and Russia, and he essentially said it was a ruse. Now we know of a meeting with President Trump, George Papadopoulos, when apparently those contacts were mentioned. What do we make of it?
Look, as with 2020 hindsight, it appears that the president wasn't saying everything he knew. But on the other hand, if you're going to hang it on this one meeting between a number of people and a fairly junior person in his foreign policy team named George Papadopoulos, who wasn't even talking about a specific meeting that had been held. He was simply saying he had contacts and could set things up. And according to what Jeff Sessions, who was there at the meeting, said, then the senator, now attorney general, that he shut it down right away. You know, it seems to me you can say that the president just might not have remembered how many meetings was he in, how many people said how many things. I don't know that that shows any real effort to deceive. I think Jeff Sessions is in a little bit more because, of course, he initially misled the Senate Judiciary Committee during his confirmation hearings when he said he'd had no contact with the Russians, and it turned out he'd actually met in his Senate office with the Russian ambassador, Sergei Kislyak. That's kind of hard to forget. After he was forced to come and correct the record and then recuse himself, he was asked again specifically about another foreign policy advisor, Carter Page, and had they ever discussed Carter Page going to Moscow. The Attorney General said no, they'd never discussed it. And yesterday, Carter Page said that he had testified under oath before the House Intelligence Committee that, in fact, he had told Jeff Sessions about it. So I think that the Attorney General's in a little bit more exposure here than the president is. Yeah.
Former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and his associate Rick Gates indicted this week. What do you think are the chances that the president might either pardon them or fire Special Counsel Robert Mueller to cut this in its tracks?
Well, look, he's been warned by a number of people not to do either. I sat down today for an interview that'll run on Sunday with the House Speaker, Paul Ryan, and I asked him about any effort to fire Mueller, and he said he would absolutely oppose it, that he thinks Mueller should be allowed to continue to do his job. Frankly, I think that if there were any effort by the president, and he has said he's not said he's going to do it, but if he did, in fact, go ahead and fire Mueller or pardon Manafort or anybody else who's indicted by the special counsel, I think there'd be a firestorm on Capitol Hill. You know, particularly after the firing of James Comey, I think an awful lot of people would look at this as obstruction of justice. And I think at that point, and remember, I'm talking about if, because no indication it's going to happen, I think we'd be getting very close to calls for impeachment.
Now, the president has made it very clear, Chris, that he's frustrated at not having more control over the Justice Department. Particularly, he'd like to see more investigation of what Donna Brazile pointed out as transgressions of the Clinton campaign with respect to the DNC.
Yeah, I find that somewhat troubling because our history is that presidents and elected officials stay out of the administration of justice. Yes, the Justice Department does work for the president. He appoints the attorney general, but they usually stay out of prosecutions. And one of the reasons is exactly that, whether or not Hillary Clinton broke any laws and whether there should be any investigation, let alone prosecution, should be something that's decided by career law enforcement officers, not a politician trying to beat the person that he vanquished in the election. So I think trying to merge politics and justice is not what we do in this country, and it would set a very bad precedent.
Well, staying with that justice theme, earlier this week after the terror attack in New York City, the president called our justice system a laughing stock and a joke. How unusual is it for the president of the United States to call for the death penalty against someone who hasn't gone to trial yet?
Well, I think the question kind of answers itself. It's highly unusual. You know, there have been cases. I remember Richard Nixon once weighing in on the Manson family, Charles Manson, and saying he thought he was guilty, and that created huge headlines. And here you have the President of the United States denigrating our own criminal justice system, raising the possibility that this person who was arrested and charged as someone who committed a crime in this country, not as an enemy combatant, should go to Guantanamo, and, you know, in the kind of an Alice in Wonderland thing, saying sentence today, verdict tomorrow. There's not much doubt that this fellow Saipov did what he did. I mean, there were a lot of eyewitnesses to it. But you kind of wonder, and I will say one other thing about this, which is, you know, for all the talk about having these folks go to Guantanamo and the military justice system, military commissions, fact is a lot more people have been tried, prosecuted, and sentenced a lot faster in the civilian criminal justice system than in the military system. So I'm not sure that if you're looking for swift, sure, and harsh punishment, the military system's the way to go. I think Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, one of the masterminds of 9/11, is still hanging out there and still hasn't had a trial.
Yeah. Finally, Chris, we learned some details about the Republican tax reform plan this week, and even some Republicans, particularly from states with high state and local taxes, are not buying in yet. What do you think are the chances of this passing?
Well, it's going to be close because in the House, Republicans can only lose 21 or 22 votes, and if they do, then this goes down. They're not going to get any Democratic votes in the House, and at this point, at least 20 people voted against the budget resolution that set this up. So if two more were to vote against it, it would go down. And exactly as you say, one of the big issues, the fact that in these high-tax states like California, like New York and New Jersey and Connecticut, they're going to do away with the deduction that people get, that you can write off what you pay in your state and local income taxes on your federal taxes. They're going to lose that. A lot of people are going to take a hit on that. They're going to have to work that out. And then, of course, in the Senate, it all goes up for grabs again. And there they've got a 2-vote margin. So, you know, all of the usual suspects, whether it's conservatives like Rand Paul or more moderate Republicans like Susan Collins or Murkowski, you know, 3 of those people can sink anything. Having said that, having failed on Obamacare repeal and replace, I can't overstate the amount of pressure Republicans feel to get tax reform passed if they don't. The idea of going to the electorate and asking, you know, to get 2 more years or 6 more years in the case of senators after a dismal failure with a Republican in the White House, it would be unimaginable. So they really know they got to get something done this time.
Right. And I understand you have an exclusive with House Speaker Ryan this weekend.
We do indeed. We talked to him about tax reform. We talked to him about Robert Mueller's investigation and Robert Mueller's future. We also talk about the story of Hillary Clinton and the fact that the deal that she or her campaign made with the Democratic National Committee, which gave them extraordinary influence over the DNC during the primaries in 2016. We'll talk to the House Speaker about all of that.
We'll be looking forward to it this weekend. Chris, thanks very much.
You bet. Thank you, Russ.